Quick, before the video starts. So if all goes to plan, I should be streaming the Game Awards tonight on this channel, live, as long as it's Thursday when I upload this. I'm rooting for Mario Wonder to win because I think that'll be funny. So if you want to come and watch and hang out and do some talking and like discuss everything while the Game Awards is happening live, come watch tonight. Hit the subscribe button so you know when it's happening. Welcome back, guys. So around this time last year, I did an emulation gift buying guide, and aside from the fact that that video did horribly, I wanted to do another one for this year because this year was such a big year for emulation handhelds. I'll be recommending 5 devices to get based on your price range that are also my favorite portable emulators of the year. Funny how that works out. This is in order of price and not in terms of what's my favorite. I will be giving you a list in the end of what is my favorite, but I just wanted to work my way up from the least expensive to the most expensive. Also, at the end, I'll be giving some that I want you to avoid, like I did last year. These are all based on personal experience and or just the general consensus around a lot of devices. But that's for the end. So let's get started with the good devices. So starting with the cheapest and probably the most portable, we have the Anbernic RG35XX and the Plus model. Now the Plus model hasn't technically released yet. I have ordered one and it has shipped, but as of recording this, it hasn't arrived. So I can recommend it because it doesn't look like they did anything substantial to the device, but as of now, we're just going based on hearsay. The regular 35XX is $56.83 right now, a weirdly specific price, which is marked as on sale from an original price of $57.99. The Plus model is currently $57.99 on their website, which is marked as a discount from $63.99. It might be that thing where these Chinese companies like mark their devices as a discount even though they're not ever going to change that price just to make it look like a better deal to entice you to buy it sooner. They usually do those kinds of tactics for bad devices, so you might see that and be like, oh, is this device really not that good? But the 35XX is really good, and I can only assume that the 35XX Plus is going to be just as good. I have faith that they won't mess up the Plus model because they haven't radically changed the design. I'm not even sure they've changed the design at all, considering it's almost the exact same dimensions as the original model here. So I think it's safe to recommend the Plus model alongside the original. The Plus is going to be able to emulate more than the original can because it has 1 GB of RAM versus the 256 megabytes that this one has. And it'll be using what I assume is a more powerful processor. The battery is bigger by about 700 milliamp hours, the difference of 3300 on the Plus and 2600 on the regular. The battery isn't a big issue on this because this lasts a great amount of time for a portable emulator because it's not emulating anything that's really power intensive. But I mean, a bigger battery is always nicer. The screen is the exact same size, so it seems like, unlike the Miu Mini Plus, the Plus in RG35XX Plus doesn't mean a bigger device, just better internals. But back to emulation. The Plus is currently being advertised as being able to play up to PSP, which means that it'll be able to play DS and some N64 games, like at all, which is interesting, but I'm not sure how well Nintendo 64 will play on a D-pad. I guess we'll just have to wait and see. I'm gonna have an unboxing video whenever the Plus model arrives. As of writing the script, like I said, it's shipped, but I don't know when it's supposed to arrive. I think it's supposed to arrive within the next week or so. So expect that, and then I'll have a review out probably within the next week. It's not like a kind of device that I really want to spend so much time with. I think I'll be able to get a review out pretty quickly. These devices, since they both sit below $60, at least currently, they both sit comfortably below $100 and work as stocking stuffers, if you can call them that. Before we move on though, I want to quickly mention the Anbernic RG Nano, and it's not in its own chapter because I don't think it's important enough or necessarily interesting enough to have its own chapter. I just wanted to quickly mention it while talking about the 35XX and 35XX Plus. It would be a kind of interesting stocking stuffer, but it is $55, and I'm not sure I would really recommend it over the 35XX or the 35XX Plus since it's the same price and honestly, nowhere near as good. This would work as like something to put on your keychain, like a stocking stuffer. Like this is the ultimate stocking stuffer because of how small it is. I just would not recommend it under any capacity. Moving up about $40 or $60 depending on the model you buy, we have the Retroid Pocket 2S. Now when I reviewed this thing a few months ago, I said that it would definitely be in the running for my favorite portable emulator of the year. And that stands true because here it is in this list. So if you watched my review of this thing, you'd know that it isn't the most powerful device out there, but for $100 to $120, depending on the model, I'm not sure you'd really expect it to be. I mean, it's small enough to be a stocking stuffer technically, but if you wanted to play it for long periods of time, that would definitely work. Because it's big enough where someone with as big a hands as me can hold this for long periods of time and like play games on it. This thing has enough power to play all N64 and DS games with some GameCube and 3DS sprinkled in there. It's not going to play everything well, but if you want to downscale, I should say, the games, that would improve the performance. But there are some games that just won't work. The differences between this and the 35XX are that this comes with no games pre-installed, so you'll have to get the ROMs yourself, and it runs Android instead of Linux. And it's obviously bigger and more powerful. This isn't a tiny portable emulator you can just put in your jeans small pocket like you can with the RG Nano or the 35XX if your jeans small pocket is that big. But it's small enough that I would say it's pocketable, because I've been able to shove this in my pocket several times. You won't be able to see it because this camera's too far up, but it's really the best of both worlds because, as I said, it's small enough to be pocketable, but not too small that it's uncomfortable to play for long periods of time. Now, as I mentioned before, this isn't the most powerful device ever made. For $100 to $120, it's not going to give you everything you need, but it gets enough done well that I think it's worth the price tag. The screen on here is perfect for N64 and DS games and other retro systems because it's a 480p 4:3 display. And neither of those things really need anything more than that. And I'm gonna be honest, while playing this thing, I never really cared about the low resolution. Obviously, I love when devices have higher resolution displays. I love upscaling games, but for a device that's not powerful enough to upscale a lot of games, I think 480p is a really good resolution. Like I said before, it runs Android, which is really common for devices in these price ranges, and it has the added benefit of playing Android games. It's not going to be able to play anything high-end, but if you have an indie game or something small that you like to play like on the Switch or is available on the Play Store, you can try and play it on here, it might run. I'm not big into Android emulation though, Android gaming, so I wouldn't know. I have the $120 model, which has an extra gig of RAM and an extra 96 gigabytes of storage over the $100 model. But the only important thing should be extra storage, because with the 2S's not so powerful internals, I'm not sure that the extra gig of RAM is really gonna make all that much of a difference in terms of emulation. I would recommend the more expensive version just because having 128 gigabytes of storage is way better than having 32, and you can fit a lot more on a 128 gigabyte device than you can on a 32 gigabyte device. But having an SD card works just as well, so if you want to get the cheaper device and put an SD card in it, that's perfectly fine. It's up to you. I think this is just a great device and it's worth considering getting the more expensive model. But let's move on. So when I started scripting out this part of the video, I kind of wanted there to be two devices for this price range just because I like having kind of variety when it comes to the T618 devices, because T618 devices usually sit around $150, and there were a lot of those released this year and last year. But the device that this section's not named after was cut because I revisited it for this list and remembered just how disappointed I was in it. I'll touch on it at the end in my ones to avoid section, but just know the Retroid Pocket Flip did not make the list. So the device I'm talking about in this section is the Anbernic RG405V. The V stands for vertical. Now this device I think resembles an original Game Boy, if only in its thickness and how big it is, but I would also say it resembles it in how the controls are laid out. The joysticks don't have that much travel, but they feel perfectly fine, and the other controls, D-pad, face button, shoulder buttons, feel great. It retails for $130 via Anbernic's website and uses the T618 chipset that I constantly complain about. I've complained about it in the past a lot in this channel because I feel like I've been burnt out on it and because I feel like it's been run into the ground at this point. But that doesn't matter right now since I'm here recommending it. Like I said before, this thing is very big and very comfortable because of it, but it is not very pocketable. I can fit in my pocket because I have big man pockets, but I don't know if many of you will. They fit. It would probably make more sense to just put it in a backpack. Emulation on here is pretty similar to what it was on the 2S. GameCube and 3DS is gonna run way better than it did on the 2S, but still not going to run perfectly. The screen is also pretty much the same. It's half an inch bigger on this and it's very apparent, but this whole device is like twice the size of the 2S, so it's not that big of a deal compared to the rest of the device. If you're a fan of the vertical form factor and don't care that much about playing every 3DS and GameCube game under the sun, I think this would be a great choice. If you want more information on this device and what it can do, I have a full review that I'll link in the description, and there are other reviews on YouTube that you can just go find. So there's a plethora of videos you can find on this device that will help you make the right decision. So yeah, I really like this device. It's great for portable emulation in almost every way, and its power is amazing for its price. It's like $130. It's awesome. All right, before we move on, I want to quickly mention the Anbernic RG405M, which is pretty much the exact same thing as the 405V, except it's metal and horizontal. I feel like jumping from $130 to like $300 is too big of a jump to do all at once, so I wanted to slot this in at $168. If you want a horizontal device that can play whatever the RG405V can, this is for you. I don't know what the M stands for though. All right, actually moving on, we have the AYN Odin 2 line of systems? Models would probably be a better word. There are 3 of these and they're all great for the price. So the AYN Odin 2 is an Android handheld that's a follow-up to AYN's original handheld, the AYN Odin 1. I guess we can call it that. And it's a damn good follow-up. I uploaded my review of the Max model, the one I have here, about a week ago. So if you want to see a more in-depth video talking about what it can and can't do, or what I think of the hardware, you can go and see that video. But here's my rundown. It uses the Qualcomm Snapdragon 8 Gen 2 CPU that's in higher end phones from companies like Samsung, and that shouldn't be surprising since this thing, Addix Basics, is just an Android tablet. But that also means that the performance gains over the original Odin are going to be huge no matter the model you buy. Now, I'm not big into Android gaming, so that didn't really matter to me because I was only concerned with GameCube and Wii emulation, and from what I was concerned with, the Odin 1 already did that really well. But then Yuzu decided to make an Android version. Like I just said, earlier this year, Yuzu made an Android version replacing Skyline, which had shut down just a few months prior. And it showed that Android emulation, at least emulation for the first party games that Skyline was unable to play, had potential on Android devices. The most disappointing thing though about the Yuzu release was that it only ran on devices using Android 11 or later, and if you didn't know, the original Odin, the Odin Pro at least, only ran Android 10. So that meant that my most powerful device wasn't able to run Yuzu on Android. It technically is able to run Yuzu now because there is a fan port of Yuzu on Android to Android 10 devices, so you technically can run it. The only reason I haven't is because the original Odin had 128 gigabytes of storage, and I already have a lot of that taken up with ROMs. So trying to run a Switch game meant that I would delete a lot of them, and then for some reason it just didn't work. So I'm gonna have to try that again. Obviously not everything is gonna run as well as it does on the Odin 2 because the Odin 2 has such a big performance gain over the original Odin, but the fact that it's there at all is really cool. The Odin 2 though, it plays Switch games so well it's crazy. And the games that don't run well, I think have more to do with Yuzu than they do with the Odin 2, because if it can run Breath of the Wild at a really good frame rate, and other games like Pokemon Violet, for however well that game's going to be able to run on anything other than a 3090, well, why can't it run Kirby? Like, there's no way the Odin 2 should struggle playing Kirby. That's definitely something to do with use. I'm sure it'll get updated with better performance in the future. This is just some kinks they're working out, but for right now, Android Nintendo Switch emulation has a really bright future, and it's really cool. It's perfectly serviceable. Heck, it's probably even more than that because it lets you play Nintendo Switch games on Android devices. So if you have like an Android gaming phone, it should run Nintendo Switch games really well. So because of Yuzu on Android, I do think that this is the best value for your money Android gaming handheld you can buy right now. But emulation's not everything. This thing is also super comfortable to hold because of the big grips on the back, and the OS that comes pre-installed on it is just bare bones Android, but it's easy to navigate and understand. There's also the option to use the Odin launcher, which I don't particularly like because it's kind of boring and basic compared to stuff like the Retroid launcher or the Anbernic launcher. But it's nice to have that option if you like it better. The differences between the models lie only in the RAM and the storage. The base model has 8GB of RAM and 128GB of storage. The Pro model has 12GB of RAM and 256GB of storage. And the Max model has 16GB of RAM and 512GB of storage. I have the Max model, which, like I just pointed out, is the most powerful model. and can play pretty much any game you'd throw at it. To be honest, you should be fine with whatever model you go with. You should be fine if you go with like the base or the Pro. I'm just getting the max because I like to get as much power as I can out of the device I buy. For the base, I wouldn't be concerned with anything up to Wii, maybe even Switch. I heard that Switch runs on the base if you like try some things. But if you want to try Switch emulation, I'd definitely go for the Pro at least, or the Max if you just want to go with the most powerful. I'm honestly not familiar with the differences in the models just because I only own the Max, and I'm not familiar with how much these RAM and storage differences will like make or break these devices. But what I do know is this amount of RAM is double the amount that was in my Pro model of the original. I'm sure the base and Pro models will be the ideal models for most people. I just got the Max because, like I said, I like to get as much power out of these devices as I can. And I feel like getting the Max model just showcases the max that this Android handheld line of systems models can do. I almost fell backwards. One kind of small thing that kind of annoys me but isn't really that big of a deal is that this thing doesn't come with a case. And that's fine because the original Odin didn't either, but the original Odin got a lot of damage just by sitting in my backpack and being thrown around, which is technically my fault, but it should just come with a case. I wasn't gonna buy a case for it. They sell one on their website, but I was like, I don't really need one. I have these cases here. But I decided to bite the bullet because I'm sick of using my Loki cases, and I just think it's worth the investment. It's only $12. The shipping was actually the same amount, so I think that's kind of funny. But yeah, I bought a case. It'll be nicer than using a Loki case, but I'm kind of annoyed that it didn't come with a case, like, at all. This thing covers the $300, the $370, and the $460 price ranges, which kind of collides with some of the devices I'm talking about next, but it's not that big of a deal. Since I'm mostly just counting it by the base price, anything more that gets added on is technically an addition. I'm not counting those as like own individual devices, and technically they are. I think this thing is a great deal, and honestly probably one of the best deals in emulation right now, since you can't really get anything better unless you go for the AYN Neo that I think is about to come out. I don't know anything about it though, so can't really comment on it. But yeah, I think this thing is a very good deal and a very good contender for my favorite portable emulator of this year. If you're looking for something super powerful, or you just want something to play Android games on, look no further. This is a great place to start. All right, moving on from AYN, it's time to talk about AYN. I just really wanted to say that. I feel like it's only fair to include the Loki models just because they technically released this year. I mean, paid for them last year, both of them, but I got them this year, so technically they count. And I loved both of them so much. Well, I loved one of them and liked the other. So there's currently 3 Loki models being sold on the AYN storefront: the Loki Zero, the Loki Base, and the Loki Max, which is a big surprise to anyone that watched my pre-order video last year. All right guys, so I am editing the video right now, but I wanted to jump in because I was looking on their Discord for something else in the video, and they still have a Loki section for the Mini Pro, which was a model that is no longer available on their website. But I guess they did end up actually sending some of those out if people pre-ordered them. But I went back to check on their website and it is nowhere to be found. There's a Loki Zero, Loki, and Loki Max page that are still there, but the Mini Pro is nowhere to be found. So it's not available to buy right now, but I just wanted to make it known because there are people who have Mini Pros. You know the videos I do where I'm like, I pre-ordered insert device here. It's almost only AYN. It's always only AYN videos on devices. I did one for the Steam Deck, but that was because I previously said I wasn't gonna get one, so I feel like I had to update that. But if you watched the one I did for the Loki, you know that there were initially 8, and yes, I mean 8, Loki models being released. They had to whittle that down because I think this is what they said in their Discord. They didn't get enough orders to satisfy the minimum order requirement for them to go into production. So they let people change their orders to one of the other options. So it went from 8 devices to 3. And I know it's kind of ridiculous to have 8 devices being sold at once, but I am kind of sad that they weren't able to, just because I feel like there would have been at least one person who bought every model and would have done a comparison. And I feel like that would have been really cool to see. But that would have been a lot of money, and I just didn't do it. The main takeaway from all of that is that now the price ranges between the models, at least between the Zero and the base model, are now way bigger. So the devices that used to fill those price differences now don't exist. But we still have 3 devices to talk about, so let's go over them. So AYN currently sells the Loki Zero, Loki Base, and Loki Max, as I mentioned before. The Loki Zero technically starts at $224 with 4 GB of RAM and 128 GB of storage, but it's marked as sold out, and I don't know if it'll ever come back into stock. So the only configurations you can buy have 8 GB of RAM, and you can choose between 128 GB or 256 GB of storage, which is a $21 difference. It's really not that big of a deal, but I mean, the fact that they took away a configuration and changed the default price is a little annoying. My problem with this thing is that it's just not that powerful for a Windows handheld. I don't know if my view is like skewed or anything, but because last year when I pre-ordered this thing, I was only able to pre-order the version with 4 GB of RAM. So I don't know if the extra 4 GB of RAM is going to make that much of a difference, but I honestly really doubt it. In my experience in Windows, this thing really struggles to play GameCube and Wii games really well. You can't upscale, this thing has a 1080p display, and you can't upscale the games unless you want them to run poorly. It's definitely designed for low-end emulation and indie games. If you're willing to put in the extra effort and put Jellos on here, you'd definitely get much better emulation performance, and then I'd recommend it. But if you wanted to play anything slightly high-end, I'd say go with the base or max. It's cheap at $250, so you can't really expect it to play that much as a Windows handheld, but if you're spending $250 on a Windows handheld, spend $50 more and get the Odin 2. Speaking of the base model, this is the only model I have no experience with because I don't own one. So this section will probably be brief, but it starts at $449, really $499 since the model with 256 GB of storage is not available anymore. So the 512 GB version is the only one you can feasibly buy. This is the version that uses the AMD Zen 3 Plus 6600U CPU, my apologies, and has 16 GB of RAM, which is the same amount of RAM in the Max model. So the differences between the Max and the base are going to be pretty slim in terms of specs, but honestly for $499, that's $50 less than the Max. Might as well go for the Max. This is definitely the route to take if you want to play higher end games, but if you want anything more, I'd recommend going with the Max. Because like I said, it's only $50 more, which, you know, $50 is a good chunk of change, but like, you're spending $500 on a device already. What's $50 to you? It does stink though that the models between the Zero and the base got axed, because going from $249 to $499 is a very big jump, and kind of stinks that the models that were supposed to fill the gaps between those just don't exist. And also kind of stinks because I would be interested to see how those run and how those play games, but they don't exist, so can't do that. Sorry. I would definitely recommend this device over the Zero, but if it's out of your price range, it's out of your price range. If it is in your price range, you get $50 more and spend it on the Max. Which, speaking of the Max, we're talking about the Max now. So if you're considering getting the base and your budget allows you to spend $50 more, just get the Max, because the Max uses the AMD Zen 3 Plus 6800U CPU, has 16 GB of RAM, and is pretty much the exact same device, just with better specs. I mean, I'm sure whatever games that run on the Max run on the base, but I'm just saying it's definitely much easier to run a game on the Max than the base, because it is just a little more powerful. But talking about the Max individually, it runs games really well. Whether that be emulators or AAA PC games, it runs them pretty much really close to as well as my big PC tower right there. It does get very loud. Fans will whir a lot if you have the TDP levels high enough, and sometimes you need them to be really high because of the game you're playing, which gets annoying because the fans will get louder than the volume of the game. But that can be fixed with headphones. So that's also not an issue exclusive to the Loki. Most of the issues that come from using a Windows handheld are present on all Windows handhelds, so it's not like you can really just blame it on the Loki. It's the fact that you need TDP levels to be high to be able to play a lot of games, and that happens on every device. I know the Steam Deck OLED has quieter fans, but a lot of Windows devices don't, and they're really loud. As a rep for all Loki models, if you want something like cheap and low end to kind of play indie PC games and in like low end emulators on, I'd say go for the Zero, but if you want to play literally anything else, go for the base or the Max. And also, if you're looking to play emulators and you don't really care about PC games, I'd say go for the Odin 2. You're still supporting AYN, but it's using Android, which is probably better for emulation because it's easier to navigate. So that's technically a wrap on all of the devices I want to recommend, but I wanted to give some honorable mentions for devices that I don't own, but have seen many reviews on that are positive, that may be worth taking a look at. And the first one I want to talk about is the Steam Deck OLED. So the Steam Deck OLED is just an upgrade from last year's model that is apparently more powerful, and like the name says, now has an OLED screen. I don't have one because I already have a Steam Deck and I don't see it as a big enough difference for me to spend the money on it. But if you're looking at getting a Steam Deck for the first time, this is probably the best time to jump into it. The base model that retails for $400 now has 256 gigabytes of storage compared to the 64 of before, but it still has the LCD screen. So if you want the OLED display, you're gonna need to upgrade to the 512 gigabyte storage model, which is $549. The best thing about this is that if you order it right now, depending on where you live, there's a very good chance you'll get it before the holidays, since their delivery date on their website currently says between 3 to 5 business days for delivery, which is way better than literally any other portable emulator company right now. If you order an Odin 2 from AYN, no clue when it arrives. If you order a 35XX, like the original, you should get it before the holidays. Can't make any promises about the Plus model though. I wouldn't be surprised if it got a little delayed because it is the holiday season, but we are about 15 business days away from Christmas. So if you order it before like the 20th, you should be perfectly fine. So I think this is a great option if you're on a time crunch and want to get like a portable PC type thing for someone you love. Thank you, Valve, for bringing attention to the portable PC market. Now we have a bunch of other companies making devices, such as Lenovo and ROG. So I wanted to group the ROG Ally and the Lenovo Legion Go together because they have pretty much the exact same specs, but they are nothing alike in terms of their design. The ROG Ally has a 16:9 at 1920 by 1080 display, while the Legion Go has a 16:10 2560 by 1600p display, which is the same aspect ratio as the Steam Deck. That's not the biggest difference though, as I'm sure you've all known, if you even know what the Legion Go is. The Legion Go has Joy-Con-like detachable controllers. Those look sick, and I've watched so many reviews on the device, like playing with it, and I kind of wish I had one. I just don't want to buy one. If they want to send me one, hey Lenovo, hey, I have an email, can I have one? Gimme. But I think it's really cool because you can use the right controller as a mouse if you really wanted to. I think that's awesome. They're technically the same price on the corresponding websites, but Best Buy currently has the ROG Ally with the Z1 Extreme processor at a $100 discount, and the version with the normal Z1 is $449, which is a big discount from their retail price. Don't know how long these deals will last though. They probably won't last much longer, so if you're looking at getting one of them, I'd recommend getting it very soon. Both devices come with 512 gigabytes of storage, but Lenovo gives you the option to upgrade that to 1 terabyte for $50 extra. Now you might say, why don't I just buy the 512 gigabyte version and upgrade it myself? Well, if I'm not wrong, which I might be, if I am, just cut this whole part out. Buying the right SSD for these devices for 1 terabyte would be more expensive than just upgrading. I think it's worth the upgrade, but I mean, it's up to whoever's buying. If you want a Windows handheld and you want it from an established brand, these are both amazing options to go with. All right, let's quickly go over the devices I want you to avoid going into this holiday season. The first one up is the worst offender, and it's the worst one out of them all. It's the worst device I've probably ever used. I'm not even exaggerating. Avoid the Powkiddy RGB10 Max 3 Pro, whatever the name is. I didn't end up reviewing this device just because of how much I hated it and didn't want to use it after I unboxed it. It has bad controls, and if you don't buy it with an SD card, good luck getting ROMs onto it. I couldn't figure it out for the first like 3 days of owning it. And so I had to go to Twitter and look for I had to tweet and find help, and then Retro Game Corps helped me and other people figure it out because nobody could figure it out. It was awful. I also haven't paid attention to much on this device since its release. I'm not sure anybody would really want to dedicate their time to it because I just don't like the hardware of this thing, as well as the god-awful software. So there might have been updates in terms of how you get ROMs on here or the OS, but I just don't care to look because I hate this device so much. That was the only like true offender. Now let's get into some I just don't really like and want you to think twice before buying. The next device up is the Powkiddy X28. Now, a lot of other people actually really liked this device. They made pretty positive reviews, but I'm here to offer a different opinion. I did not like this thing. Its unique design intrigued me, but the pre-installed OS is clunky and the controls weren't good enough to justify it. It's being sold for $150 when you can get devices that are much better than that for cheaper prices and also around the same price. This thing just did not impress me like it did everybody else. I really tried to like it, but it's just poor design, poor hardware. It's just like a really weak design overall and really weak device, which really kind of sucked because I wanted it to be the turning point for Powkiddy. It really wasn't, and that sucks. So avoid it and don't buy it. Buy any of the other ones on this list that are cheaper. Don't waste your money. So the next device I want you to avoid might come as a surprise to some people, but it is the Retroid Pocket Flip. If you've watched this far, it really shouldn't be a surprise since I mentioned earlier I'd talk about it again. This device was hyped up by myself and others who were really excited to see Retroid take on the clamshell form factor after both GPD and Powkiddy had abandoned it for their devices. But this thing just did not do it for me. I revisited it for this video because I thought maybe I was too harsh on it in my original review. But I really don't think I was. The controls are just pretty mediocre for a Retroid device, and the clamshell nature just doesn't feel right. It doesn't go all the way back and only locks at 2 positions, all the way open and closed. Which is a big disadvantage when what I want to do is I want to set the device up and play like this, but it moves and it doesn't stay up. It's just awful. And the fact that it doesn't open all the way, like this is as far as it goes, really pisses me off. This device was really disappointing, especially coming from Retroid. I used the review of this device to complain about the T618 chip and go on a kind of a rant about it, but this device's flaws lie way deeper than just the chipset. It's just not what I expected, and other companies have made better devices this year. So just avoid this one. That's it for devices to avoid. If there's any I missed, let me know down below. But if I missed a device that I'd want to avoid, I'm glad I missed it, because I don't want to talk about devices I don't like, even though I do that fairly often. Anyway, it's time to reveal my ranking of the devices from earlier. So, drumroll please. Ta-da! Alright, I think I should explain myself. So let's start at number 5 and work our way down. So at number 5, I put the Anbernic RG405V. And I want to clarify here that being at number 5 doesn't mean it's a bad device. It wouldn't be in this recommendation list if I viewed it as a bad device. It just means that out of all of these devices, I'd probably reach for it last, and I'd reach for the Anbernic RG405V last. I prefer the horizontal form factor over the vertical one, so this one is already at a disadvantage, but I just feel like out of all of these devices, it's the least unique. Like, I've seen this device a million times before in terms of its internals, and the uniqueness, if you can even call it that, of its hardware doesn't save it. It's a great device, don't get me wrong, but just in my opinion, it's the weakest on this list. Going down to number 4, we have the AYN Loki models. Now, this may surprise some of you because of how often I talked about how excited I was for these and how much I seemed to sing its praises when I reviewed it and also like discussed it in other videos, but I promise you I have my reasons. I feel like it's really not as practical as the devices above it or even the device below it when talking about portable emulation and gaming, because I love this thing, but I'm not sure it really stands as tall as the other Android and Linux emulators because of what it stands for in terms of portable gaming. Don't get me wrong, I love that I can play PC games on the go, but there's other ways to do that now via the Steam Deck. And also, I'm not a big PC gamer. And this thing is clunky. If I'm gonna take one device out of the house, say if I'm going to like school or something, I'm not taking the Loki. If I'm going on a long car ride or a plane ride, maybe I will, but that's like a rare circumstance that I don't really go on anymore. For portable emulators, something that I'm supposed to be able to take on the go and go out with, I'd rather take almost any other device. I just put it above the RG35XX. Nope, that was wrong. I just put it above the RG405V because I feel like it's more important than that, and I like it better. So it's really not all that practical compared to the other devices, but I do like it better than the 405V, so that's why I put it higher. And the software and internals and design are unique, which helps it all stand above the 405V, which has a unique hardware design, but uses the same internals we've seen over the past like 2 years. At number 3, we have the RG35XX and the 35XX Plus, which I guess we can just rope in because it hasn't technically been released yet, but I'm gonna get one and probably gonna love it. But judging solely on the original 35XX, I think sitting right in the middle of the pack is totally justified. It runs Linux, and it isn't the most powerful or comfortable device I've ever used, so I can't put it above devices that have those strengths, but it is unique enough and comfortable enough to play for long periods of time. It doesn't get too cramped. It gets cramped if you play for so long, but for a device this size, are you really playing for so many hours on end? It's just a super convenient device to own because it can play a lot of retro systems and fits in my pocket really well. I don't need to do the test again, but just know it's in my pocket. All of that, I think, evens out to a good third place, putting it above the AYN Loki models, because of the stuff I said. Now, second place may surprise some people that this device isn't my first place choice, but my opinions have changed a little bit. And at second place, we have the Retroid Pocket 2S. This thing is great and really portable, which makes it awesome for short trips, which basically helps it fit the same criteria as the 35XX, but it is a little bigger and can play some more stuff than the 35XX can, so that's why it's a little higher. It can't play everything. It does struggle with GameCube and 3DS, but if you want to play any of those, you should just go with the RG405V or the Retroid Pocket 3 Plus if you want those. This thing is great for its cheap price and small form factor, so if you're looking for something like the 35XX that can play higher end games, this thing isn't really like that because it's not vertical, but I'd say it's similar enough because it's cheap and fun to use. And it's why it's at number 2. It's also at number 2 and not number 1 because of the AYN Odin 2. Funny how that works. So before the AYN Odin 2's release, the Retroid Pocket 2S was probably going to be my favorite handheld of the year. But this thing came and like hit such a ginormous home run that I can't put it anywhere other than 1. I don't need to sing its praises again, but in the 2 times I've talked about it earlier in this video and in my review, I love this thing. It's incredible. It can do any type of emulation I throw at it that's available on Android. It can do Nintendo Switch. It can do probably PS2 and PS3 if you really try. I don't care about those though, so I haven't tried. It can play GameCube and Wii really well. It can play 3DS really well. It's awesome. I love it so much. If you want to hear me gush about it more, go watch my review. Watch my review right now. No, actually, finish this video and then watch my review. My opinions haven't changed since that review. I love this thing so much. So go watch that if you want to hear me gush about it a little more. And I think it's time we wrap this video up. It's been way too long. The devices I chose for this list were not chosen lightly because there were a lot of portable emulators released this year and I didn't want to recommend something bad. When I was initially scripting this video, as you've heard several times, I put the Retroid Pocket Flip in the same section as the Anbernic RG405V. But then I revisited it because I wanted to make sure I wasn't recommending a bad device, and it turns out I still don't like that thing. I chose my favorite devices of the year to recommend to you guys, and I hope you take them as a recommendation. And if you're looking for a device to get a loved one or someone you know, hopefully this was a big help. If you have a different list than me, or if you have a device I didn't talk about, let me know in the comments down below. I don't have a life, so I'll be sure to get back to you. Also, let me know if there were devices just generally that I didn't talk about. I'm always up for new devices because it seems like we can't go more than a month with having 6 new released or announced. This video is already way too long. As I'm filming it right now, it's 1 hour and 26 minutes, so I'll let you go. I really appreciate it if you watched this all the way through. I doubt any of you will, but if you did, leave a comment down below and I'll be sure to heart it and be like, oh my god, thank you so much. I really appreciate it. Because I really do. Comment your favorite device from this year down below if you haven't already made a comment. I don't want to make you comment multiple times because then I just look greedy. I'll be streaming tonight if all goes to plan, and I'll see you guys next week or later this week with my RG35XX Plus unboxing and impressions video. I'll see you guys then. Goodbye.